Good afternoon, or good morning, wherever you are. Sorry for the delay in getting started, but welcome to the introductory session for the Audiences and Analytics module, Get Inspired for Audiences and Analytics. Brought to you by the Digital Empowerment Project for Small Museums, a nationwide initiative organized by the 6 U.S. regional museum associations dedicated to providing free, self-paced training resources for small museums. This inaugural series of online trainings focuses on digital media and technology topics and is made possible by funding from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. My name is Avery Shaughnessy Comfort. My pronouns are she, her, and I am your host for today's program. My visual description is I am a white female with short, wavy brown hair. I am wearing red square-shaped glasses and a light blue short-sleeved top with a dark blue cardigan. I am located in my home office, and there is an off-white wall behind me with 2 windows and a bookcase. In this era of virtual meetings, when digital spaces may substitute for our physical sense of place, it is important to reflect on the land we each occupy and honor the Indigenous people who have called it home. I am speaking to you today from my home office, which is located in Erie, Pennsylvania, the historical homelands of the Erie and Seneca peoples. Wherever each of us are located, let us acknowledge all Indigenous nations as living communities, their elders both past and present, as well as future generations. We, the Digital Empowerment Project for Small Museums, recognize that our organizations and those of our members were founded within a colonizing society which perpetuated the exclusions and erasures of many Native peoples throughout the United States and beyond. We ask you to reflect on the place where you reside and work, and to respect the diversity of cultures and experiences that form the richness of our world and our profession. And now it is my pleasure to introduce today's presenters, Arturo Garcia and Emily Robertson. Emily Robertson will be going first. She is an independent consultant for Studio Robertson based in Boston, Massachusetts. She is the marketing manager for GORE Place in Waltham, Massachusetts, as well as the founder of Studio Robertson, a creative project management studio based in Boston. For more than 20 years, Emily has helped museums give voice to great ideas and bring life to their great projects with a focus on data and accessibility. Emily earned her MBA in business analytics at Babson College. Arturo Garcia is the manager of marketing and communications at the Museum of Photographic Arts in San Diego, California. He is the manager of marketing communications at the museum, and he is also a board member of the Public Relations Society of America San Diego and Imperial Counties chapter, serving under the Professional Development Committee, in addition to supporting the board's efforts towards equity, inclusion, and diversity. So as we get started, let's please welcome Emily up to the screen. And let's begin. Emily, you can take it away.
Thank you so much, Avery, for that great introduction. And hello, everybody. And I'm wishing you a warm hello here in Boston, Massachusetts. Let me get going on sharing my slides, and we can begin this talk that I'm very excited about. Okay. All right. And I'm just checking in, Avery, you can see my beginning slide okay? Like everything's...
You're good to go.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks again for that great introduction, Avery. Again, my name is Emily Robertson. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm coming to you from Boston, Massachusetts. I'm here in an office space. I've got a blue curtain behind me with a small set of shelves, and I'm wearing a black blazer and a blue floral top. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be speaking to you about one of my favorite subjects, which is data analytics. So this is the session that I'm hoping that you will get inspired about this topic, how museums can use data analytics to understand their audiences better, meet business goals, and have an overall improved experience on their day-to-day work. I'll introduce myself again here. I'm going to give an audio description of my slides. I have a white block on the left side of the slide that says meet the presenter. And on the right side, you can see my photograph. And below that text about myself, I'll read it. It says Emily Robertson, owner and founder of Studio Robertson, and my website, which is studiorobertson.net. Topics to be discussed. On this slide, I have a list of the topics I'm going to discuss today. I'm going to spend about 20 minutes total. My first topic will cover what makes a great analytics project. Next one on the list would be data analytics in museums. The next two on the list are two data case studies, and I'm going to talk about GORE Place specifically. We'll talk first about understanding audiences, and then the next case study will be about reducing expenses in a particular area of the museum. And finally, I'll wrap up my talk by sharing my tips for great analytics projects. So let's just kind of get down to basics here. On this slide, it's a blue background with white blocks of text. At the top, there's a title that says Defining Data Analytics. So for this part of my talk, I want to get down to basics to talk about what does this term mean. Beneath that title, I have a very simple definition of data analytics. The process of, number one, learning insights from data, and number two, using those insights to make decisions. Now, I often feel like a lot of people focus with data analytics. If you were to Google it, you probably would see the first item on this process list being where people tend to focus, learning insights from data. I always like to follow it with that step two, using those insights to make decisions, because otherwise, why are we bothering going through the motion of collecting data and analyzing it and learning insights if we're not going to do anything with them? So it's really this two-part process in my mind. And I'll repeat that again. That first part being learning insights from data, and number two, using those insights to make decisions. And I learned this process primarily when I was in business school. I actually studied data analytics as my primary concentration in business school. I did that because it was the thing that I knew the least about, and I wanted to go to school to learn something that I didn't know anything about. I had worked in data projects in museums for many years, going back all the way back to beginning of my time in museums in 1999. I worked at the Museum of Science in Boston in the early 2000s to mid 2000s. Doing visitor studies and then working in temporary and traveling exhibits and analyzing data to improve the business from that perspective. And just really always loved working with data, but I was always a little bit nervous and a little bit afraid of it. And when I went to Babson and really threw myself into data, it was a kind of a crash course of really understanding analytics from the perspective of many different kinds of businesses, not just museums. And I learned to sort of shed a lot of my fears and actually come to really enjoy it. And so I think if for my audience today, if you get nothing else out of what I'm saying to you today, I hope that you will feel empowered to learn a little bit more about how you can use data in your day-to-day work and have fun doing it and actually use it to make great improvements. So that's my big hope for you. And I've really designed this talk for a small museum audience. Perhaps you're coming from an all-volunteer organization where no one is paid at all with a relatively small operating budget. I'm speaking to you today. I know that you can use data and have a lot of success with it, just like I do. So let's keep going. So the data analytics project, I like to think of data analytics in kind of a project basis, and we can do them in small projects, say day to day. I know that my co-presenter Arturo is going to talk a little bit more about how he does day-to-day data analytics within social media. You can also do it weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually. I mean, the projects can be really any size, but they all have the same steps. And that's something that I learned at Babson, that data analytics projects can have a lot of similarities across industries. We don't need to be a big Fortune 500 company to do data analytics, and we can all follow the same project steps. So the slide on the screen right now has a title at the top that says Data Analytics Project Steps, and then a graphic I made that is like a cycle graphic. It has 4 arrows, and they're pointing all in the same direction, counterclockwise, in a circle, with each step along the process within that circle. So the very first step at the upper right corner of the circle is number 1, set goals. This is absolutely the most important step. It is the foundation of any data analytics project. If you don't have a goal, it's impossible to know what data should you be looking at in order to make decisions at the end of the steps. So you should absolutely start out with a goal. Your second step along this cycle is to collect your data. Finally, the third step would be analyzing the data. And the fourth step at the end of this project steps would be to make decisions. And then it's an iterative process, so it just keeps going in that circle over and over and over again as you learn more about what your data is telling you. Now, I should say there's a little asterisk here. There is actually a step that can occur before the first one of setting goals. And that would be where maybe you don't know what your goal is and you want to investigate a little bit further. Let's say, for example, you're budgeting for the next fiscal year. and you want to know, you're not really sure what specific goals you want to work on in the next fiscal year within that budget. So you would do something that we tend to call data mining, where you're looking for trends within a set of data, but you're kind of looking at it in sort of an unbiased manner. You would just sort of be investigating and be curious about what the data might be telling you before then setting any goals and doing a further kind of actual analysis. Data mining is a term that's often used. It's really specific to big data and AI tools, artificial intelligence tools that help us to understand very large sets of data, but the principles can be applied also to very small sets as well. So museums use data all the time. This is a new slide on the screen with an orange background and a title at the top that says museums filled with data. Museums may be filled with collection objects, that's absolutely true, but they're also filled with data in every nook and cranny of the museum. On the left-hand side, I have a list of museum operations areas where data may be existing, things like financial systems, collections management, security and safety, fundraising, and much more. And on the right side, another list for audience engagement. We can find data in exhibition planning and programs, digital outreach, advertising, and so much more. Just an example here with collections management. Your museum may be tracking the environment in your galleries, or even in an individual vitrine. You may have a relative humidity monitor or a temperature monitor. And the information, the data that's coming out of those monitors may help you to look ahead and decide, does my museum need to make some upgrades on our HVAC system? Maybe the relative humidity hasn't been stable. And then that data might help us to make decisions about the overall operation of the museum with the HVAC system. So let's get into talking about GORE Place specifically. I do assist with marketing initiatives for GORE Place, and I'd like to tell you just a little bit about it. GORE Place is a wonderful museum. It's owned and operated by GORE Place Society. It's a private nonprofit museum and farm. And this photograph on the screen right now is an aerial photo taken a few years ago showing the property, and it's 50 acres of open space amongst the suburban sprawl of Metro West suburban Boston. We can see along the skyline here, the horizon line, we see the city of Boston and the Boston skyline with its skyscrapers. And GORE Place is located just 9 miles west of downtown Boston. It's like a little jewel box here. It has 3 historic buildings. They interpret early 19th century history, from decorative arts to agrarian and agricultural history. It has a working farm that raises a heritage breed of sheep called Leicester Longwool. It's open every day of the year. Visitors can actually visit the property on the estate for free for unstructured visits. And it also runs museum programs and offerings all year round. It has an operating budget of about $1 million and a little bit more than 15 full and part-time staff members, more than 60 volunteers, and a 21-member board of governors. I think that they like to think of themselves as sort of a small but mighty organization. They get a lot done, incredible output, and I'm very proud to be associated with them. And I want to say hello to everybody from GORE Place who's watching today. A little bit more about GORE Place. We can see one of the historic buildings, the 1806 GORE Mansion here on this photograph, surrounded by a field of clover and the brick mansion in the background. And this is an interior photograph that shows one of the spaces inside the mansion. It is the Great Stairs. It's a beautiful spiral staircase. And then finally, this is one of the Leicester Longwool sheep. This is a photograph of some of the ewes in the background, and we can see in the foreground a really adorable baby lamb that was recently born. So getting into a little bit more on GORE Place's digital landscape, I'm going to talk about these case studies from a marketing perspective. And we're going to be able to see, hopefully, a little bit more about how GORE Place uses sources of data, both from digital and analog sources, to make better marketing decisions. So within the digital landscape, the absolute keystone of the landscape, the thing that everything else surrounds, would be goreplace.org, which is GORE Place's website. Everything leads to the website. It's really the core of the marketing and digital business here. Underneath it on this graphic, we have little boxes just underneath goreplace.org, and each one has a label, and I'll read them from left to right. First, we have email marketing, and then social media, followed by the online shop, so e-commerce. Next, we have our donor database, or CRM, which stands for Customer Relationship Management. It's a tool that allows the museum to track donor and member information and engage with these constituents. The next on the list would be the Ticket CRM, which is an online tool that allows the museum to sell tickets online and also at an in-person box office. Finally, we have further to the right visitor surveys, both pen and paper and digital. And the last one on the list would be other sites. So other places where visitors might be interacting with us, such as review websites that link back to goreplace.org. So within this, there's each data, each silo has its own data collection that it's doing, getting information in, storing it, and then allowing us to look at it within stored analytics software. For example, within goreplace.org, we connect our website to Google Analytics, which is a free tool that's supplied by Google. You can also connect your website for free if you haven't done it yet already. I highly recommend it. And it gives all sorts of information about what's going on with how our audiences are interacting with our website. For example, it tracks traffic sources. So how do people find goreplace.org on the web? Where are they coming from? And it tracks a list of it that's ongoing. So we can look each month and see how our traffic sources are changing over time. All right, I'm going to come back to this a little bit further. So now I'm going to talk about two case studies. The first one would be how we use data analytics at Goreplace's Sheep Shearing Festival. This is a slide that on the left has a very cute, I hope you think it's cute, lamb born at the farm at Goreplace. It's a marketer's dream for sure. And on the right, I have some text that says data analytics at the Sheep Shearing Festival, followed by goal number 1, improve the visitor experience, and goal number 2, maximize net income. So these would be the two goals that I set up from a marketing perspective whenever we run the Sheep Shearing Festival, which is an event that the museum runs in the spring. It's been running since 1987. When it started then, it had 100 people at it. And today it typically gets, on a beautiful day outdoors, 10,000 visitors. So it's really like a fundraising gala for Goreplace. And because there are so many visitors, there's just really a lot going on. And it's really important for us to use sources of data to help us to meet these two goals. So improving the visitor experience. I'll talk about that one first. That typically involves, for example, improving the visitor experience when they come in through the ticket gate. There's data that we're collecting from credit card machines, from our online ticket sales, other sources like that, that help us to improve the actual operation of the ticket gate. And we can actually track these data over time. So each year we run the festival, we'll improve the experience at the ticket gate in that iterative process. Goal number 2 here being maximizing net income. It actually is typically, I look at marketing spends from the perspective of being able to refine where we're actually spending our paid advertising dollars. So we'll look at paid advertising. For example, a few years ago, I recommended that the museum should start getting into radio advertising. So they started to do paid advertising on radio stations. And then at the festival, we ran a visitor survey and asked people a lot of different questions. But one of them was, how did you hear about the event? And then that information helps us to understand which paid advertising channels were actually working for us. And we found in that year that we took that leap into radio advertising and spent more money there. We actually found that radio was one of the key places that people had heard about the event. So that showed us that that was a good decision to make, and we've kept doing it each year. The next case study I'd like to focus on would be within the private event rentals business at Goreplace. On the left, we see a photograph of Goreplace's tent, which it owns on its site. It's a seasonal century tent, hosts lots of different kinds of events, and there's a beautiful wooded area in front of it. On the left, we see data analytics with private event rentals and more texts that give us two goals that we focus on within this business. Goal number 1 being reducing advertising expenses, and goal number 2, reallocating advertising funds. So this is a little bit similar to the sheep shearing story, where we looked at our advertising expenses. Where were we spending money? And one thing that we noticed was that we were spending money with a particular advertising channel that I just sort of had this feeling that wasn't performing so well for us. So we went to Google Analytics and looked at the data there, and we could see that that advertising channel was not popping up in the rankings of our top traffic sources. So we decided to actually reallocate that funding, moving to goal 2, reallocating those funds to another area of our marketing business. So these goals are really linked together. And we were able, by using data analytics, to actually cut the advertising expenses in half and then reallocate that funding. So I'm going to wrap up my talk by sharing with you my tips for successful data analytics projects. So this is a blue slide with white title at the top, and I've just read it. And then the tips, and I'll read them first before explaining a little bit more. Tip number 1, get to know your data sources. Tip number 2, set your goals. Tip number 3, start small. Tip number 4, trust your gut. So let's look at tip number 1. So get to know your data sources before you do any goal setting, any work with data at all. For example, I mentioned earlier, if your website is not yet connected to Google Analytics, you could set that up. And then just look at the Google Analytics dashboard and understand a little bit more about what information you can receive out of that dashboard. For example, you might look at just your traffic sources. And so you're just sort of getting to know things before you try to jump in too far. Tip number 2 would be set your goals. I feel like I've been talking a lot about that today. Goal setting is really the foundation of data analytics work. So once you've gotten to know your data sources, then you can go to setting your goals. Tip number 3, start small. So that example of Google Analytics, you might start with just how many website visitors did you have this month as compared to last month. You might track that over time and see what trends are coming up before setting forth to make any decisions about those insights. Tip number 4 is actually my favorite one, trust your gut. So sometimes we just have a hunch about something. We know that our gut is telling us that, hey, maybe spending money in a particular area for, say, paid advertising just kind of isn't working. We just sort of know anecdotally that it's not working. Maybe we should transition that spend. And so data studies can really back up what your gut is telling you. Now, sometimes these things don't line up. Sometimes your gut says one thing and the data says something else. And it's really up to you what to do with that and how to make those decisions. That's the end of my talk. Again, my name is Emily Robertson. You can reach out to me again at studiorobertson.net. I want to thank you for watching. And my final slide, I want to thank the Museum Learning Hub and the Institute of Museum and Library Services for funding the Digital Empowerment Project. And thanks so much. I'm happy to take questions at the end of the talk. And it looks like I'm going to pass the microphone actually over to my co-presenter, Arturo, and I'm really excited to hear what he's going to say.
Hi, everyone. Are you all ready to zoom into social media? Okay, let's get started. So my name is Arturo Garcia. My pronouns are he, him, his. Just a little visual description. I am a person with brown hair sitting in my living room with a plant behind me, some curtains. I'm wearing a light brown jacket and a white button-up shirt. A little bit of what I do. I am the marketing manager at the Museum of Photographic Arts. I handle day-to-day social media, so implementation of content, listening. I also do strategic communications for the museum, so planning what our campaigns are going to look like, and then have social media be a tactic of those. I get support for media relations. I also handle email marketing. So all the tactics in communications I supervise and oversee. My museum is, again, the Museum of Photographic Arts. We're in San Diego's Balboa Park. We are a pay-what-you-wish museum, which so it means that we're donation-based at the entrance. The public gets to choose their price point to enter into our galleries. In addition to that being our venue, we also have programs throughout the county of San Diego, youth programs in schools, and also some programs for older adults throughout our different communities in San Diego. I want to do our land acknowledgement as well. The Museum of Photographic Arts acknowledges its presence in Kumeyaay land. The museum respects the ancestral tie of the Kumeyaay people to this region and seeks to honor these connections to both past and present. Lastly, before I get started, the size of our museum is a mid-sized museum, also according to the American Alliance of Museums. All right. Have you all ever been asked how social media is doing? And though you spend a lot of time posting, drafting creative content for these platforms, you freeze and you can't seem to answer this question. What does success look like there anyway? During the summer of 2020, our board at the museum got really curious about our social media content. We were locked in our homes, including myself. The museum had been closed for a few months. We had no idea of when it would reopen. This is summer last year. So the only glimpse of MOPA was really our social media channels, our posts, our Instagram stories, our tweets. I sat in multiple meetings with different board members, both listening to their content ideas while also trying to make a case for the ideas of our public, the community that we had built online. And when I say our public's ideas, I mean the stuff that they were constantly voting for each day with each like, comment, direct message, or DM. The stuff that had bright green percentage points next to them under our Insights tab. And so I told them, I think our public likes vertical images of skies. The more clouds, the better. That's what my analytics were telling me. It stuck with them, and I think they found some humor in that. It was that simple. I have a little example. What I mean, they work for one of our youth artists. I forgot to mention this at the beginning, but we host an annual juried youth competition. So all the artwork goes in our galleries. Anyway, I don't think I was using analytics right at that time. I was looking at what had worked, but I had set no intention for success. Had I gone through deep planning to find out that the best way to do marketing for the Museum of Photographic Arts was going to be that my public would like and love vertical images of skies? No, I had no engagement intention. This calls back to what Emily kept bringing up during her presentation, goal setting. I'm sure many of you have found yourselves in similar situations, whether you do marketing or produce digital content or in-venue content, that is exhibitions, for your organization. How do I want my public to react, and how will I know if they're reacting in such a way? My family and friends often say that I repeat jokes too many times. My colleagues at work have also started noticing. The other day in our galleries, a group of 6th graders toured one of our new shows, which features portraits of celebrities, musicians, actors, changemakers, all from the 70s. There is a portrait of John Travolta, another one of Mick Jagger, to name a few. For a couple of weeks now, I have joked that we were getting very close to getting the Olivia Rodrigo portraits, but didn't get them in time, so they're not up on our walls. For those of you, like many of my colleagues, don't know who Olivia Rodrigo is, she is a current teen pop / grunge sensation who rose to fame last summer with music hits like Driver's License and Good For You. Fun fact, she's also from Temecula, which is a few miles north from San Diego. Anyway, I've gotten a chuckle at most with that joke. Why? My audience just never seems to know who she is or why the joke is funny. The 6th graders from our tour, though, they knew. They knew her greatness and how a portrait of Olivia could be more intriguing for someone their age, and how it's also kind of silly that it would also have been a bigger revelation for a 30-year-old marketer in San Diego. That's the joke. As for Olivia, as the kids would say, I am also a stan. And so now I know that I'll make the Olivia Rodrigo joke when we get more youth tours. For my colleagues, my friends, my family, maybe I'll reference 90 stars like Britney or Gwen. I've listened, I've learned, and in marketing jargon, I'm optimizing my sense of humor. That's why I repeat my jokes. If my goal is to make folks think I'm funny, then I need to listen and I need to adapt my jokes. The laughter will indicate what joke will stick. But really, the laughter is guiding me to my true North Star for telling jokes altogether. The hope that people think I am funny. So how do you move the needle on social media? How do you know where you want to go and how to get there? For us at MOPA, we define average engagement rate as an indicator of success. It tells us that our audience is reacting to our content. It's simple and it results in growth of the channels, meaning follower growth, which is what we want at this moment. What I mean by average engagement rate is the likes, the comments, the shares that a post get is averaged based on the reach that the post will get. And so I average each post, but I also average per quarter. So it allows me to see within that quarter which ones get higher engagement and which ones get lower. And I'll talk about that more toward the end, because I am giving you all some resources, some templated resources that I do. Exactly the same spreadsheet, exactly the same process that I use. Anyway, back to how we use average engagement. So our content, when we read through it, it tells us that our content is good. The folks who follow are staying, and they are sharing the content, which is exposing us to new followers. Therefore, we know it's working. Our goal is to grow our channel. Our indicator is to keep engagement at a standard, say 200 likes per post, or that it goes up to maybe some posts peak at 500. But there can be other ways to measure success. If you're a content producer that wants to push out content about art that engages your public in a meaningful way, say you want to teach something, you're producing this type of learning content. Maybe try measuring how many questions you get per post. That's a good indicator of value, meaning your content is giving value to those consuming it. Your goal is then providing value. What indicates if you're meeting this is the number of questions you get per post. If you want to be regarded, here's another example. If you want to be regarded as an organization, maybe that's breaking the mold of museums, maybe post some memes and track how many laughing emoji you get per post, or LOLs. Track these reactions. Mark these notes on a spreadsheet. In my experience, I pull whenever I have a set goal and I'm looking through analytics, I pull everything out from those platforms. Those platforms can be very intimidating. At my start in my analytics journey, those platforms were really what were causing me much anxiety, much fear, just to see all those numbers, all columns or all tabs having even more numbers just dropping on you. So now I have a goal. I know what number I'm looking for. I go in there in the wilderness of numbers coming at you. I pull what I want, and then take that and put it away in a spreadsheet. So I'm cleaning everything up so that I only look at what I really need. The other day I was telling my partner that it's kind of like when you go grocery shopping, and the difference between going there with a recipe in mind. And so you know what ingredients you need, and the difference between when you go in and you don't know what you need. And so everything is looking at you. And so maybe you end up getting more than you need. You go in without an intention, without a goal. Back to the LOLs and the laughing emoji. So yes, track these, put them on a spreadsheet. Your goal then is to influence how your audience sees you in this example. How you do this is by posting memes. So that is your implementation, your content strategy. And how you track this is with emoji or LOL. So that's just one idea. How I do this is that at the end of each quarter, I assess which memes get the most, or for this example, I would assess which memes would get the most LOLs. I would find commonality, laughing out louds, laughing emoji, maybe people actually posting ha ha ha. I would find commonalities in them in the top 4. And I would produce more of the like. So I would see what those 4 had in common. Then I would look at the bottom 4 as well. I would find commonalities, make those assessments, and do fewer of those, or remove those types altogether. So again, I mentioned at the beginning of my chat here that I will be sharing 2 resources that will get emailed to all attendees. One is a spreadsheet where I keep track of the average engagement so that I see which months average higher, and so that I see which posts average higher within the quarters. And then the second one is where I conduct my assessments, and that is a 4-step process that will help you assess your content. It's pretty simple. I call it the being better at being better process, because it's really for you. And just another side note on that, the template has questions at each step. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and I left questions there for you, which are the questions that I ask myself when I'm making the assessments at each step. Analytics can be seen as journaling. It's a very intimate process where you self-reflect, excuse me. It's not to show the world or your board how well you're doing, or at least not at this point. It's to show yourself what's working and what's not, to then adapt. It's where you go in at night, pull out your diary, and write out, you know what, maybe that joke isn't funny after all. Thank you all for your time with me today. My name is Arturo Garcia. I'm the marketing manager at the Museum of Photographic Arts here in San Diego. And yeah, thank you for your time, and thank you for the Museum Learning Hub for organizing. I appreciate you all.
right, give us just a moment. We'll get Emily back on screen. Okay. Thank you both for a fascinating conversation on, how widely we use analytics in museums and how widely those pertain to our audiences. So we have quite a few questions, so let's get started here. This is a question perhaps for the both of you to think about. It's more of a comment, actually, but I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Sometimes in museums, we have, more than one person analyzing data or analytics or something. And sometimes that happens where people come up with different conclusions. So what are ways that, you can come up with common ways to think about your data? How do you address that in your institutions and the places you work?
Yeah, that is a really interesting question. Arturo, do you want to jump in or?
I was just going to say, I don't have a lot of experience doing cross-department and that analytics inside. However, if I was thinking of like I've been a in-house marketing person of one, but we're about to hire a part-time apprentice who would be doing a lot of listening and interpreting and assessing. She will be taking some of that. And so I would say that, at some points, yeah, there might be conflict and there might be different assessments of what it means. Maybe find a resolution and go make the decision. So make sure that you get there, and yeah, whenever there is conflict. So maybe you both don't agree, but just agree on what the decision will be, and then continue listening to see if it was right or wrong, and go from there. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I love that answer, Arturo. I was going to say, I would say certainly something I didn't talk about in my talk, that I had that cycle graphic with the arrows with the 4 steps of a data analytics project. The making decisions portion, that last step, includes really what's hidden in there is the reporting. And I think that's probably the key to getting everybody on the team involved on the same page. So the person, if there's multiple people collecting data about the same thing, I would probably try to get together and talk about that and just, try to see if you can actually collaborate on it. And if you can't, if you're one person collecting data about a particular initiative, that in your report, you would include not only the decision that you would come to your conclusions, but you would also walk through how you got there. So you could, in that team meeting, get everybody on board with, this is how I got to this decision. So my reports always include my conclusions, my, executive level, takeaways for the information, and then the actual raw data that was collected. And so that everybody can see that raw data. And that can kind of help back up how you got to that decision, and hopefully you'll be able to get on the same page.
Some great suggestions on how to be transparent and to be open about the data that you're receiving. Absolutely. So another one of our questions, when it comes to advertising, it often seems that the data just isn't there sometimes. You may see that you're not getting clicks, but you don't know what impact on brand awareness. You're just seeing your ads as they are, essentially. Any thoughts on that? Maybe Arturo, you want to jump in on that?
My thought is, and I haven't conducted these, but when you do like a follow-up question of so that you it's called like ad recall, so that you're assessing if the public served remembers your ad or your message, which is where the brand awareness is coming up in. So you can do that on paid social. I know that.
It's very helpful to know. All right. This one's for probably for Emily. I'm thinking back to your cute little lamb that you shared. Yeah. What is the best way to draw an audience's attention to an organization, and what kind of data should we be paying attention to for engagement purposes?
Yeah. Well, again, I would look at that goal, making sure that it's that you're really honing in on exactly what you're focused on. So for the sheep shearing festival, Let's take that example. Let's talk about sheep, that adorable lamb. I think that we're at GORE Place, we're really focused on the visitor and giving them a great experience. And so really tracking over time, as the festival changes over the years, we're actually looking back historical information to understand. Let's just take, we know for that festival, visitors love to come and see sheep shearing, live demonstrations of sheep shearing. It's a key part of the event. And we know that because we've asked people. We've listened to what they have to say. And we do that through various kinds of visitor surveys, in-person surveys, online surveys. We might even consider doing focus groups for that to really get at what are the things that are really drawing them to come to that particular festival. And we store that information and analyze it and then keep looking at it year after year. It just it doesn't really go on a shelf and get ignored. We actually look back at it to make sure that we're really meeting their needs and continuing to attract them to come to GORE Place. And the lambs help a lot because they're very attractive anyway.
The cute little lambs definitely help. And Arturo, I'm thinking of when you were talking about the sky and what people really like to see. What are your thoughts on the best way to draw an audience's attention to your organization and the data that you pay attention to?
Well, it is. That's funny. When I was choosing that example, I think there is some. What I said can be complicated. Those are attractive images, and that's what my public was saying. What I was saying is that I didn't have an intention to use them at that point. In marketing, you use to influence a public, to whether it's perception or where it's like a harder conversion where you want them to maybe like buy a ticket or something. On Instagram, vertical images work, and that are beautiful images work, and to grab attention. But then in addition to that, you have to, that's a tactic. You have to have a strategy. You have to have a goal as to why you're using them.
Very helpful. This is an interesting question for both of you. For communicating with board members, how can this data that we gather be useful? And how do we convey those analytics utility to people like the board in a very digestible way, but recognizing how important it is in the process?
Yeah, I can jump into that one. That's something that I'm very focused on, particularly in marketing. Marketing is often seen as sort of a spending sinkhole in organizations. And so I'm constantly trying to kind of perhaps show people that, it doesn't have to be that way. So with GORE Place, with that budgeting, anytime we're spending money, I make sure that our board members are very clear on what it is exactly that we're going to be spending those dollars on. And I actually work closely with them to make those decisions. GORE Place has a marketing committee that I work closely with, and we work on the budget together every spring. So we decide together what we're going to be spending the dollars on. And then as the budget goes through, I work with the team to help them to really stick to that budget, reallocate it where we need to, but we stick to that bottom line. So I think, just having that really clear communication with board members is obviously very good. And data analytics can help us even further with that, because I always come to them every time I'm coming to them with a decision, a recommendation that I'd like them to pursue or follow with me. I come armed with information from data analytics to support my case.
I also want to answer that one as well. And sorry for nodding aggressively. I'm very, I love analytics. But I was going to say that, so in my talk, I mentioned that analytics can be a process for yourself for the purpose of optimizing. So when you just get in the weeds of it, for those spreadsheets that just have all the numbers, that can be for you, I would say. When you set like your year, like annual, big goals of how you're going to move the needle on digital marketing, for example, I would, yes, present those, like what you're going to reach during the year, present those numbers, those few numbers, and then recap in your annual maybe report. Yeah, I would say that to share the bigger stuff.
Absolutely, and a great idea to share that in your annual report too. Not just even for your board members, but perhaps for your general public. People like me also think analytics are fascinating. So curious for both of you, some of your comments here on active versus passive visitor feedback. So this person is saying, like, what are some ways that you've seen that are really successful in gaining active versus passive feedback? Is it surveys or proxy sensors or something like button logging to generate data? You know, what have you seen that works?
I just want to clarify, active meaning, is it active like a visitor comment something directly from them that they're in their own words, versus passive being maybe a credit card transaction? Is that maybe what they mean by active versus passive?
They did not clarify here, but I'm gonna guess that active is, you know, you're in the space itself and currently in that mode, and passive might be something more more is like that feedback later on, perhaps, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'd like to look at. I think as museums get more and more sophisticated with the data analytics projects that they're running, they may actually be looking at multiple sources of data across a single goal question. And certainly, as an example, just getting back to the Sheep Sharing Festival again, with we're running, we're looking at sources of data from multiple different places. So different kinds of visitor surveys. We're looking at where we're spending money. Again, mentioned paid advertising, social media data, web traffic, to kind of understand the whole picture of how people are coming to the festival. If we're looking at the goal of just attracting visitors to the festival, we're looking at that kind of across that data. And so I guess if I'm understanding active versus passive, I'm very interested in visitor comments, so directly from their own mouths, or what they type. If they're like in their own words, they're actually telling us what they think, and then examining that against that would really be qualitative data, so sentiment analysis, things like that, understanding the words that somebody uses, and then comparing that to quantitative sources, things like web traffic, credit card transactions, those sort of little bits of data that are out that are not necessarily from that person's actual own words, and then understanding across there. So we may look at online social media comments about the festival, and then examine them against information that we get from other sources that are quantitative. I hope that that's helpful. I don't know, Arturo, do you have another take on it?
No, but I have a tip for something else that kind of has to do with it. So I don't collect feedback for visitor experience, because that's just not that's a bit outside my scope. But I do use it as another tactic of my promotion. So I ask for Google reviews in our email marketing, and Google My Business has like a link that is just a form. And so when I'm promoting an exhibition in my email marketing, or when I'm talking about an exhibition, I always have a call to action that says, have you visited? Leave us a Google review. And so I'm using the same, our loyals, our people who are already in our circle, to act as another tactic or touch point of our promotion, by then giving that feedback, but using it instead as promotion. Because they leave us a Google review about the current exhibition, which is one of the things that pop up when folks are Googling a space like ours. And then I don't do it to collect feedback. I do it more as just engaging on social media. When folks tag themselves using the geotag when they go on Instagram and they tag that they're at the Museum of Photographic Arts, I love replying and asking how their visit was. And I do that just to also bring them closer into our digital ecosystem. Sometimes they're tagging the space, but not the account. And I'm messaging them from the account. So then they realize, oh, there is a MOPA Instagram account, and they're asking me how my visit was. And it's typically lovely comments.
And it puts the person behind the account, right? All right. So last question here, and then we'll do some closing remarks. Would love to hear from both of you. What can small museums do to track data with limited funding and resources?
I don't use any paid listening. I use the analytics that I get from Google Analytics, the analytics that I get from Instagram Insights, Facebook, and then I pull it out into the spreadsheet, that template that I'll be sharing. And well, I guess we do have MailChimp for email marketing, and that is paid and it comes with its insights. But I don't spend on listening tools. But who knows? Maybe as I learn more, I'll get more interested in those. I'm not saying that you shouldn't.
I would say this is great. I'm so hopeful that small museum professionals that are watching today will actually undertake some of this. I'd be very excited if you would, and please reach out to me and tell me about your successes. But I would say my number one thing to do would actually be, remember how I had that slide about the digital landscape for GorePlace that mapped out GorePlace's website and then all the other silos of data where we're receiving information about our audiences? There are probably even more than that I didn't include on the graphic. But I would actually map that out. We did that as an exercise on our team pretty recently and mapped it out. And it was really, really eye-opening to see that there's so much information out there and a lot of different ways that we can kind of slice and dice it. And it can be overwhelming, but my recommendation would be to draw that out and then pick one thing to focus on. So let's say it's just your email marketing and try to move the needle on one point in your email marketing. You might try, for example, to increase your open rate. Or increase your click-through rate. How many people are clicking on a piece in your email? These analytics should be free with most tools. You shouldn't have to pay a lot of money to be able to get access to information about how these tools are performing for you. And you can just concentrate on one thing, and you're going to see successes by just concentrating on that one thing. And then as you get more used to that, you can add another thing and another thing. But I think if you're an organization, let's say you're all volunteer run that has no budget, these tools most of them have free ability to look at their data at no additional cost. Yeah, so that would be my kind of number one thing.
These are fabulous suggestions. And I think a lot of our viewers are in this boat where they have either no or limited resources. So it's good to know that these things are out there. Emily and Arturo, thank you so much for today's program. I think we are definitely leaving inspired to look further into our audiences and analytics. Yes. So thank you very much for your presentations.
Thank you for
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. And for everyone out there, thank you for attending today's program. And once again, thank you to our wonderful instructors. If you enjoyed today's program, please do us a favor and share it with your networks. We really appreciate your participation, and we hope to see you for future programs. Stay tuned to museum-hub.org for more information on upcoming events. Remember to visit the forum on our website to ask questions. Follow us on social media to stay aware of future programs. And lastly, be sure to join us for the first of our technical workshops in this module, creating an analytics toolbox to evaluate museum digital experiences with Elena Villa-Espeza, Assistant Professor of the School of Information at the Pratt Institute in New York. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we hope to see you next week. Stay well and take care.